The core of your campaign is really understanding who your audience is, where they spend their time, what types of problems you want to solve for them, how is their day looking like. So when then you build things for them, whether it's a product or a marketing campaign or a channel where you're trying to approach them, you find them where they are and you speak their language, and then just everything else becomes a lot easier. Then you get those leads and you get those conversations because it makes sense.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Insurance Growth Lab. I'm Calvin Harrington, and today I'm joined by Ido Deutsch. Ido is the VP of Growth at Agentero, and if that name sounds familiar to our listeners, Ido was one of our first guests on That Worked. When it comes to careers, Ido is a full-blown Renaissance man. From playing on the Israeli World Cup team to founding multiple companies, he has literally done it all. And if you're interested in hearing that full story, highly encourage you to check out episode number 5 of That Worked. Now, for our deep dive, we dove into the weeds of Ido's strategy for acquiring insurance agencies through paid media, especially Facebook. So many companies that have an agency tech product or distribute their products through insurance agencies avoid paid media altogether and swear it doesn't work. Admittedly, I've been in that category before. And I will say this, that notion was myth busted today on the episode.
Starting with the audience, where they spend their time, figuring out a way to experiment with all of them, with the audience, with messaging, but with channels as well. And then within those channels, when you can figure out that something is working well, double down on it. That worked really well for us. And then from there, that's been, as I said, like 8 years ago. For the last 8 years, Facebook is our most productive channel. So it gets us a very predictable amount of leads per cost that we are spending around. We are spending, but it's not a crazy spend. Our cost per lead is probably like $30, $40 or something like that.
If you've ever thought about testing paid media to acquire insurance agencies as customers, you won't want to miss this one. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and let's get to the show. So this is interesting. This is the first guest that we have welcomed back as a guest. We've had some co-hosts, but Ido Deutsch, VP of Growth from Agentero, welcome back to the show.
Awesome. Great being here. Thanks for having me, Calvin.
So Ido, and if anybody wants to hear kind of your full career, I highly recommend they go back and listen to the original episode that we recorded, which we'll talk a little bit about some of that because you might be one of the most low-key interesting people that I've ever met. That I didn't even know all this until that original episode.
Lots of surprises.
To say the absolute least. But for this one of the areas that I would love to start out, and we did talk about this a little bit, but I don't think I realized how much this had an impact on you. Tell us about founding that first tech company.
Yeah, that's a funny story. So, end of my teens, early 20s, I worked in a lot of restaurants, just paying bills and stuff like that. And then very clearly remember that being in the restaurants, serving people, and then also getting orders online. So sitting in the restaurant, then back then, that was 2008, 2010, you would get orders online via fax machine. So people would order online, and then in the restaurant, you had a fax on the countertop, and you would wait for those A4 pages to print one after one in the peak time. It would be crazy insane, like with like 40, 50 pages, like waiting for one page at a time. And I was just like standing there and couldn't believe that is happening. Like that was like so stupid for me. And probably 2 months later, I came up with, met a technical that became a co-founder, a technical person. We talked about that. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. So at that point in time, we just created a new product to make this whole process digitally and connect it to the restaurant's point of sales and stuff like that. Just remove this crazy friction point that was so difficult to manage in the day-to-day operations of the restaurant, right? So this is how I came up to start my first company. Did it all digitally. And then this is actually going with me like in almost every other thing that I've done in the past in terms of like career steps and like new things that I've built. And it happens right now as well with Producer Flow. I've been in a situation within Agentero needing to do do something around compliance and licensing that just didn't make any sense to me. Like, why does it have to be that manual and that like there's no real solutions in the market? And it's just then easier to like, I was like, let's build a solution for that. And we build it. And now when I'm in this place trying to market and sell Producer Flow, it's so much easier when you've been in the place of like feeling the pain, understanding like how challenging that is, and then just speaking that language to the people on the other end. So that makes everything a lot easier. So,
well, I mean, so let me summarize this real quick, make sure I got you. But essentially, what I'm hearing is the first startup, you had this overwhelming feeling of why is this being done this way, and instead of waiting for somebody else to do it, you just said, well, why don't I just try to fix this problem and see what happens. And so you found a technical co-founder, but then fast forward to Agentero, and those that may not be totally familiar, Agentero is a modern agency network that's got thousands of agencies, and Producer Flow is a compliance and onboarding platform. So what I'm hearing is the same thing. You had this problem with compliance and licensing and tracking all of this and making sure you're on top of it. Said, why are we not like, why don't we just solve this and then take that to market? Is that right? Did I essentially get all that correct?
100%. It's more like, it's not the thing about waiting for someone to build it. It's just the feeling like even looking in the both back then, and like, that was like almost 20 years ago. Back then when I started this thing at the restaurant business, there were some solutions out there, but none of it made sense. Like, why do like when you feel this pain and you see how people are building a solution for it, it just didn't make sense to me. And so it's not like waiting for someone else to build. I didn't feel like there is any other option, and this is the same here, right? Like I couldn't stand what's out there, and doing this problem manually, it was just such a big pain. And I feel like that's throughout my career, that's the best place to come in when you build a new product. Many people are like thinking about a problem of someone else and trying to solve for someone else, but when you feel it yourself, I feel like this is the best place to build a product, or the easiest way then to go to market and market to that same audience. When you feel the pain, when when you know how it feels and what the challenges that you go through on the day to day, it just makes all the marketing pieces of afterwards and the go to market stuff so much. I wouldn't say easier. It's never easy, but like coming up with how to go to market, what's the type of voice and what's the type of challenges you're solving, and just target to that audience just becomes so much more clear and easier to do. Like, you don't have to do a bunch of like brainstorming, strategizing, do a lot of, like, it's just clear. Like I've been there. I know how it feels. Like, just tell me what it is and how you solve it. So I feel like personally that works. It worked for me throughout my career, and just makes afterward, go to market and things around that a lot easier.
I'm curious, when does it make sense to actually build this? Do you go like in this scenario, did you ask the people that were out there if they could make these changes because this is what we need to see? And do you just hear no enough times on that? It's like, we have to build this. But when do you make that leap to actually build it?
Great question. Definitely looking at what's out there, because that's the easiest, right? Like, you have a pain, you go out and search for what's out there. You look at the solutions, you talk to them. Many times, I mean, there are a lot of good solutions in the market for many different challenges. For those specific ones, I don't know how to generalize it, but for those specific challenges that I've had both back then, now with Produce Flow, it happened a few other times in my career. The solutions that were out there just felt like being built for something else, like not for those problems. Like they built a solution that kind of like solved around that, but it's not really targeted for that pain, not for me as a user, right? Like, so it wasn't a lot about like, let's talk to them and figure out how to fix it. and how to build something different. It's just like they built something that didn't make sense for me. That was definitely on when we started. Here with Producer Flow, it's a little bit different. There were a couple of solutions in the market. Some of them are really, let's call it, I don't know if old is the right word, but like they were built quite a long time ago. So they were not like, it wasn't easy to work with them. And then the only solution out in the market actually solved for some of the problems. It wasn't very flexible for what I needed. So I needed something more flexible. And that's why I built. But it's also like on top of that, there were also commercial terms, right? Like, and how commercially they work and if it makes sense. For me, it didn't make sense. So I initially built for me. So I built a solution for our problem specifically. It made a lot more sense to us. Later on, we figured out that more people have this problem as well, right? So we knew that more people have this problem, but they have the same problem that the existing provider couldn't solve for them, or the commercial terms didn't make any sense for them. So this is why we built Producer Flow. But what I want to take from here is more like the go-to-market and like how you approach people and why, like how much you need to know your audience in order to create an attractive go-to-market, and in order to get a successful go-to-market marketing motion, dimension, whatever you're looking at, if you're looking at go-to-market, I think this is the core of your strategy. The core of your campaign is really understanding who your audience is, where they spend their time, what types of problems you want to solve for them, how is their day looking like. So when then you build things for them, whether it's a product or a marketing campaign or a channel where you're trying to approach them, you find them where they are and you speak their language, and then just everything else becomes a lot easier. Then you get those leads and you get those conversations because it makes sense.
Well, let me ask you this. I agree with all that. One of the things that I'm curious about is you mentioned that it makes it easier when you start out with a problem that you personally experience. Why does that make the go-to-market? It makes sense on like the product. Why does that make the go-to-market easier? Is that because it's easier for you to tell that story? Other people, like it's easier to identify and segment who you need to target because you know them and you know these problems more intimately? Or is it something else entirely?
No, I think it's all of the above. So thinking from a personal perspective on, whether my first company or this problem, like when you firsthand see that you need to like copy and paste and go in and search manually, and there are no good solutions for that. It's like, why do I need to do it? And then when you take this pain, so I think both in product, when you build it, should start from a pain, right? Like, what are you trying to solve for? I think marketing should be, and I think a lot of people I'm talking to are doing the same, but looking from like, what is the pain that you need to market this product, right? Like, what is the pain that this audience is experiencing? And it could be within the same company. It could be multiple different people that are experiencing this problem from different aspects, but at least you at least have to know, like, you can maybe be all of them, but you can start from one, and maybe that should be your first type of person that you are targeting within a company. But you speak to their language, you speak to their problem. When they see your ad or when they see your email, it speaks a lot. You could do that without experiencing the problem. Of course, a lot of people are doing that, right? Like a lot of people learn the audience and learn what would make sense and what is the messaging that need to come across. I've done that multiple times in the past as well. But for me personally, I feel like it's a lot more organic. It works a lot better. Both the marketing materials and the results of the projects turned out to be a lot better. Maybe I feel like personally, when I go deep down, I think it's because I relate to that, from like as a marketer, as a go-to-market person, I relate to the audience, which makes probably all the marketing motion around it a lot more relatable. That's how I feel. That's why they're more successful. But I have done a lot of successful campaigns for people that I didn't know insurance. I was not an insurance person before. I was not an insurance agent. I still built a lot of successful campaigns and built a very successful motion for insurance agents, right? And demand gen and sales motion and all that for insurance agents. And I want to think that I'm relating to, but for personally, it's harder for me to relate to that. I have to think through all the same things, but without relating. I feel like it works better when I have experienced this problem firsthand.
I mean, there's definitely a lot of truth to it. I mean, I would actually probably make the argument that it's probably more impactful on the sales side than it is on the marketing side, because one of the biggest things is, like, if you're not passionate about that product that you're selling, like, I've sold websites to insurance agencies. Was I like like, did I go to sleep at night like, man, I love insurance websites? No. But
Yeah.
I was passionate about the agency and the impact that can have and building the team and all that kind of stuff. But if you're not, if you like, I do. One of the reasons
But you've been an agent before as well, no?
yes, I have, for
Yeah.
sure.
So do you feel like it had an impact on it had an impact on how you approach it, why it made you curious about this problem and made you
Well,
better to solve that?
we're getting into like the question, right? Does insurance experience matter or not? And I think it's a really interesting question. And I'm probably not as dogmatic as I used to be on this. And I was very much of the mindset of insurance experience didn't matter. Now, that was like kind of hypocritical, because as you said, I was an agent. Um, yes, it made a big difference, 100%. Having that background made a big difference. I think the key is somebody on the team, where I think I probably came around to a lot more, is somebody on the team's got to have insurance experience. And somebody has to be able to teach that and, like, know the actual nuances. Because the biggest thing that helped for me was, we would, this is kind of like the hammer trying to find a nail problem, right? And we're pushing a feature or something of a product into an agency. And I could look at those products and say, this isn't going to work. Like,
Yeah,
this
exactly.
doesn't fit the
That's exactly
flow
what I'm talking about.
whatsoever. Yeah.
Hmm.
No, I think it's a great point.
And I think it's not that if you don't have it, you can't be successful, of course. Like, you don't have to have an insurance, in this example, insurance experience to be successful selling to insurance agents. I feel like you'll be, as you said, like, you kind of know how they think, you kind of know, what would make sense and what not. On your calls with them, you'll be a lot more cutting to the chase. They will have much easier time speaking with you. Like, you'll ask better questions. You'll ask, more relatable questions, because they feel the same pains. Like, you can learn all of that for sure if you have, you train well and you get the sales motion, you listen to enough calls, you can do all that as well. But I feel it's, you're more curious and you're more relatable, and it's a lot easier, and it comes back more naturally when you have that, when you felt that. That's how I feel. Like, it's all learnable. It's a skill you can learn. But yeah, as I said, like, I think for me it felt better and more impactful, and the results were better when I had this background, when I had this pain, when it's just makes everything a little more organic and a lot easier.
Yeah, I think, to me, it's like the keyword's easier. Like, I agree with you. Like, and I've seen people that didn't come from the insurance space and come in and, like, especially over the long period, like, that character will take over everything. Like, a high character person will take over everything. But if they've got high character and they have insurance experience, or in the scenario you're describing, like, and experience that problem, it's like, it's dramatically shortened. They could, it's exactly that point. They could speak to that problem directly a lot easier. So that makes total sense. Now, one of the areas that I'd like to chat a little bit about is, one of the things, even as I was kind of going back and re-listening to that, original episode, and what I said in the beginning, like, you have this low key, this one of the most interesting careers. You were, like, your whole life up until 18 was, the national soccer team, with
Yeah.
Israel, playing on, like, the World Cup team for the under 18, and then you, like, make this abrupt change to, like, not doing soccer anymore, to founding your own bar, founding your own tech company from the pain you experienced in the bar, moving to Boston during the
Yeah.
snowmageddon, moving across the country to go to business school at Berkeley and Agentero. And you talked about this a little bit. And I'd love to dive into this a little bit more. What has been kind of that throughput, that line of kind of thinking at each one of these places that you took? Like, is there a commonality? Is it like I'm looking for what I don't want to do? Like I know what I don't want to do, so I'm looking for more of what I want to do, or is it opportunistic or something just completely different?
No, that's a great question. I'll probably give you an answer and then I'll think more about that because it's a really good, really good question. Like why I moved from one step to another. Like in retrospect, of course, I have when I paint the picture, it kind of makes sense. But for me, I'm a growth minded person. I always accept and enjoy and want to take new experiences and learn new things. Whenever something new is coming up, like I'll be all over it. I'll try to do it. So the same thing, like there was an opportunity to to move to Boston, and I was like, yeah, let's do it. It's like, what do I have to lose, right? Like it's also thinking about like opportunities, like being the opportunistic. Like I have this opportunity, let's take it. But it's also being able to take the risk and jump. This is like started my first company. I felt the pain. I would not today. I would not ever start a company as I did this company that was bootstrap, didn't raise any dollar, didn't make any money for like 18 months, just grinding and grinding and grinding, trying to build a product that would have a fit and, would go to market, knocking on doors and restaurants one by one and getting this product in. Like I would never do it today this way. But I loved, like, I really wanted to build something back then. And it felt like I want to learn how can I do it better? How can I grow? How can I make it more? I think this is the through line for me. It's like when if I see something that does make sense, I'll build it. But it's more like I want to experience more things. I want to grow my skill sets. When there's something new in the market, I want to try it. Like AI comes up and I'm like all over it, right? Like I'm like there are probably people that are doing it more than me, but like I'll try every new things that come up. I want to learn. I want to take new experiences. So I think it's a combination of that with opportunistic, like thinking about like the big picture, learning and growing, plus being opportunistic. Like, oh, I have an experience, I have an opportunity to do X and Y. Does it make sense? What am I going to learn? Is it going to help me grow either in my career, professional or personal life? If yes, then why not? Like, what do I have to lose, right? So I'll just take the step and just do it.
What I'm hearing you say is that at each stop, something came up where you had this opportunity to grow and you didn't really think too much about it. Like you knew it was good, you knew it would stretch you. And like what you're saying, it's like, you're kind of wired to jump, to go and let's figure it out once we're in there. Is that right?
I think a lot of it is right. I think a lot of it is what makes me excited about building things and start things from scratch. That's why I consider myself, if people ask me about, work related, what you are, I'm always consider myself a builder because I love to build from scratch. And a lot of it is like, I want to figure out, I want to build, I want to learn. Everything is different, like experiencing new things, stretching yourself, being in outside of the comfort zone of places how do I approach those people? How do I get to them? How do I build this whole thing? Now I need to, you have a revenue target. How do you get there? You just jump in and you figure that out. Many people are spending a lot of time in the planning and they could spend months or years in planning things. For me, it's more like, let's just jump right in and start doing. I think that when I take this through line, it makes sense for me also on like how I do marketing, for example, like experimentation and building a framework for experimentation. Like the way I'm thinking about marketing for an audience, like I never think like, well, in the case that where I feel like I'm very strongly opinionated about the case because I've experienced it, this is one thing. But if I need to build emotion, like, oh, a new audience that I'm not familiar, insurance agents, joining Agentero, I met Luis at business school, didn't know much about insurance agents or at all, and needed to start building a machine to get demand and building demand gen. The way I've been thinking about it is like, let's experiment with many things, learn from everything that we're experiencing. Let's build a way to track all those things that we're experiencing. So then when something is working, you know that it's working. I didn't experience this pain, right? Like, I don't know how to speak to those people. Let's just throw a bunch of things. Let's make sure that we know what we are tracking, what will be the metrics that we are trying to move, and just do a bunch of things until we find what's working, and then when we find what's working, then double down on it. I think that's a throughput. Like, if I you just asked me this question, I was like, oh, this is what's top of mind, and I probably need to think about it more, but maybe not, because it's like, it's the same thing. And like, that's how I think about growth. That's how I think about marketing. Like, you don't really know things, right? Like, you kind of know your audience, but until you try things and figure out what's really working, you would never know, right? Like, you could think and brainstorm and do like a million things in the back, but until you put things out there, track it, figure out if it's working or not, and testing different things, you wouldn't really know. So, and you have to learn every time. You can't just put things without learning. You have to put things, you have to have the framework and the methodology to understand what you're testing, what you're expecting to see. So what's the result that you're trying to see from those, if we call it marketing, if it's campaign, what are the results you're trying to see from this campaign? And really track it and test a bunch of things until you find the things that are working. And once they're working, double down on it. So my personal and professional career is kind of the same. Like, let's try, let's figure out, let's jump right in, let's do it. If it works, let's dig more, let's do more things around that. So I think that makes, for me now, bringing it from top of mind makes total sense.
All right, so let's get in the weeds on this. It's a perfect segue. And one of the areas that I really want to dive into deep is Agentero specifically probably has one of the most successful, I'm going to call it marketing assisted product led growth in acquiring insurance agencies. And for our audience, it's maybe new to go to market motions for insurance agencies. And I've done this in P&C, life, health. I've done it across the board. The most tried and true is cold calling. And it still works today. Cold calling might be slowing down everywhere else, but it still works with insurance agencies. And it doesn't mean that the conversions aren't changing. But one of the things that, even from our original first conversation, I mean, I could tell you when we first spoke and you were saying like, yeah, we're generating a lot of these on paid campaigns. And I remember thinking, I don't buy it.
Yeah, it's been 8 years now. It's still going. It's super predictable and growing. So yeah, for sure.
So and obviously we've got to know each other and we've worked together for multiple years at this point. And so I know this is real.
I didn't make it up.
Yeah. So let's talk about this because so many people try and fail. Not to say that there's some people that do this well as well. I don't want to make it seem like this is this impossible black box and you're the only one that's ever figured it out. But it's not a big number. I can tell you that for sure. Where did this start? When did you start experimenting with it? What channels did you start experimenting? What did this look like? What was the genesis for even trying this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I met Luis, the founder of Agentero, founder CEO at business school. Joined him while I was still in business school, working full time on Agentero. And the first thing that, because I was still a student at business school, and he was like, yeah, I need help building some dimension. And the first thing I did was, like I've done many times in the past, okay, start with the list, right? So who are you targeting? Get the audience, like understand. I didn't know anything about insurance agents. So, this is where it all started, figuring out, learning more about insurance agents. And then building this methodology of experimentation, right? The first thing I've done was researching contacts, probably many people have done it, either buying lists or going online, trying to figure out lists of, who is your audience, how you're going to approach them. And generally what I did was going into email, right? Like cold calling and email, pretty straightforward, testing a bunch of things. It's probably taking me like 2 weeks doing a bunch of experiments on those to figure out that also agents spend a lot of time on like everyone else on social media. Like, when you talk to them, well, where are you looking for things? How do how do you find new solutions? When you talk to them, when you send them emails, stuff like that they talk about social media. So I was like, let's try same thing as I've done, in my life, in my career. Let's just put more experiments. So it was just me, right? Like just me, or like 3 people, 4 people in an incubator in Berkeley, and went into Facebook, started a campaign, got a couple designs, started like what the initial part was just like putting like what probably everyone else is doing, just putting some campaigns out there and starting to track results. And within my methodology, it's always like, okay, we put in something on Facebook, we put in something on LinkedIn, we put like, where are agents spending their time? So learning more around that. And I think the initial campaign that really changed how I think about that was getting this contact list that I've researched in the past. So I had a bunch of contacts, let's say 20,000 contacts of insurance agents, emails and names, whatever, putting them in Facebook as a target audience. And just letting, like, I didn't know much. Like I've done that in the past, but nothing to that extent of like building a methodology around that. But I saw that this is starting to work, right? Like I put in like 20,000 contacts in the audience on Facebook, and then Facebook is matching the audiences. And then I see that those ads are starting to work and bringing a couple leads that were converting better than other campaigns. Once I've seen that, that was a clear signal to say, this thing is working. Let's double down. So increasing the leads, increasing the audience in that list, increasing the campaigns, increasing the spend. This has shot up the leads and the conversions really high, right? And then from that moment on, of course, we expanded. We are a lot smarter on, who we target, how we target, which specific campaigns and images and all that. But the first thing was figuring out the campaign motion that works. This came out with a lot of experimentation. So going back to trying to sort of like looking from a top to bottom, starting with the audience, where they spend their time, figuring out a way to experiment with all of them, with the audience, with messaging, but with channels as well. And then within those channels, when you can figure out that something is working well, double down on it. That worked really well for us. For the last 8 years, Facebook is our most productive channel. So it gets us very predictable amount of leads per cost that we are spending around. We don't have we are spending, but it's not a crazy spend. Cost per lead is probably like $30-$40 or something like that. It's not expensive, considering a lot of different places. Like it, depending on, for us, it's not really expensive.
Sure. Like especially when you think, I think one of the things that, and it definitely used to scare me away 100%, because I remember, because I knew paid search on the insurance side, and an insurance click could be $70, $100 per click, per click. And one of the things I think that's often, unless you're from the space, and you guys learned this, right? And I mean, and you guys definitely, you and Luis both were at Embroker. You were at Embroker, and Luis was at CoverWallet.
Yeah.
So there was some insurance experience for sure, but neither of you probably would have known that some of the biggest agent communities are still housed in Facebook.
Yeah.
They haven't moved
crazy,
to
right?
Yeah, and it's not, and that's not a crazy, like, the funniest thing about that is, so like, if you look at like Dave Gerhardt's B2B marketing group, Exit 5, that was a Facebook group, I believe, for a very long time. And it's a hard decision, to deplatform and move to another platform. But so like, it's funny, like when you hear that, like I said, like, it's wild that Facebook's still the top driver, but at the same point, that's where the communities are. And that's like one of the weird strangleholds that Facebook still has, are these communities.
For sure. I mean, you can look at it as Facebook. I'm going back to the audience and say, like, when you know who those agents are, when you know how they spend their time, Facebook is very easy for them. Like when you look at their age, when you look at where they're from, like the communities in Facebook, they're reaching out to the community to sell insurance, right? Like they connect with real estate realtors in the community through Facebook. They find their business through Facebook, so they're spending time on Facebook. They're also in the age group that don't use like TikToks or whatever. Maybe some of them do use TikToks, but maybe like for us, we are starting to experiment with new channels, but they're not that successful. Like when we experiment with like a Instagram or TikTok and things like that, it's okay, but it's not the same, right? It's not working the same. We're still figuring out our motion there, but I think a lot of it results from like the audience doesn't spend a lot of time on those platforms. So you could build a successful YouTube motion or successful Instagram motion. That doesn't necessarily mean that they don't spend time there, but I think a lot of them are still spending their time on Facebook. So yes, the communities will be there. They're spending their time. They're playing games on their phone on Facebook, like those type of things. So when you have an ad, this jumps up on their insurance agency, and they're playing whatever Candy Crush. I don't know what they're playing on their phone, and then there is an ad that's come up from Facebook saying, "Hey, you need more. You need more carrier access. You need a better way to run your agency." Oh wow, yes. How do you know me? I'm here playing, and you're reaching out to me with this message. Thank you. And they click and they become a lead, right? So that those things, if you know where your audience is spending your time, this is where you need to go. And sometimes it's not straightforward. Like before Agentero, I would never imagine that Facebook would be working as a at scale channel to generate leads that would convert to clients for a B2B thing, like maybe consumer, but B2B, I would never imagine. But it's working really well. So it's a lot about knowing your audience and experimenting.
Now, I play Candy Crush before taking off and landing.
Did you get my ad? Did you get my ad?
I actually just made the connection. It's because I'm an agent at heart.
Yes,
it makes sense.
We know it all about you. We know.
Yeah, you probably do. Sadly, but I would argue almost probably all of us have that same guilty pleasure, and that's super interesting. Okay, one of the areas I want to zero in on is what's the optimization process look like? What types of analytics are you looking at? Do you have any types like analytic platforms that you're using? What does that look like?
Yeah, good question. There is a lot around metrics. I think it always starts simple. Like you could always dig deeper to like, the images and time spent and like, there are so many metrics you can look at. I'm always going back to like, there is this funnel. It's like, so I would split it into two. One is like when I'm building my experimentation framework, I want to have a metric that I'm aiming towards, right? So it might be leads generated or a cost per lead or a cost per conversion. The general theme for me is like marketing should make sales easier, right? Like just generating leads doesn't help anyone unless they're converting and they're converting at a good pace that eventually,
you just made my entire sales audience so happy with that statement.
Oh yeah, it doesn't make sense to generate leads just for the sake of generating leads. That's why when I basically built my role at Agentero, it's very hard for me to differentiate marketing from sales, for example, right? Because I think about it as a funnel. Like you have to, when you separate marketing and sales, maybe there are other parts of marketing that could be separated, like branding or things like that. But like anything related to lead generation and demand gen, like building a bunch of leads that then don't convert doesn't make sense. Like your experimentation shouldn't be just on, I could generate those leads, but you need the clients eventually, right? So you have to track the revenue. Like there are metrics to revenue all the time and conversion. Like I would rather generate one lead that converts to one deal to one sale versus generating like 100 leads that convert to one sale, right? Like I spend a lot more time in spinning my wheels on those 100 leads to get to one sale versus if I generate one lead that is good, that is converting. Like you always deal with those optimizations in Like you also want volume, but you also want it to convert, so you don't just want to add people, right? So this is always like high level funnel that in my mind, like that's why I'm really have a strong opinion on a revenue leader managing both marketing and sales. Again, especially the demand gen parts of it, I think it doesn't make sense to separate those in my view.
Ooh,
Uh,
ooh, this is a spicy
do you
hot
want to have
take.
another episode on that?
Potentially,
We can have another episode on that.
potentially a spicy hot take. Do you think that the CRO should own, or you use whatever title you want to use on that? Should they own sales, marketing, customer success? Should they own sales and marketing? Should they own sales and customer success?
I think
Should
the
they
whole
own just
customer
sales?
journey. My point of view, and it's pretty strong. It's the whole customer journey because you want to optimize for the customer, for your audience, and it starts from awareness and what they think when they see you. So I would even claim that it could go to the brand building. But when you talk to marketing deeply, there is the dimension and there is the branding awareness pieces, which I could see some arguments why brand could be separated from it. But other than brand, anything that's related to lead gen, messaging out there, this is all part of marketing, sales, and definitely post post client acquisition, so success, right? So you have to manage your client experience. Like if you see that holistically, you would optimize the right things, versus if you don't look at it holistically and you have your own goals, like in marketing or in success or in sales, you would optimize for your goal, and you might, in most cases I've seen that happen, that then you have those marketing and sales pushing in different directions, and there are all those like, oh, but those are not good leads, but they're not converting. Like you'll have like infightings, and like this is not helping anyone. The most important view is the customer view, or the prospect or the customer and their journey, in my opinion. And you want to optimize for that. To be successful in optimizing for that, there has to be someone that leads. The salesperson wouldn't do marketing, but the leader that sees that holistically and strategize around that should see that holistically and should see the whole, and own this whole funnel, right? That's how I think about it. Like if you separate marketing and demand gen, you start getting like frictions. You start, like, the client starts getting like weird experiences, right? Like they'll see something on the messaging, on the marketing, on those PDFs, or on those things that are coming out, and then the salesperson would go on the call and do like they wouldn't talk to the same value propositions, or they wouldn't talk with the same functionalities, or they wouldn't know which campaign specifically this one came from. Like that, there are starting to be so many frictions between marketing and sales, and they show up. It's not the frictions it's not the internal friction that worries me. It's more like what the customer sees, right? And I think it works better when you have someone that is owning the whole thing.
I it's a very interesting debate.
Mhm.
And I used to feel very strong, like how you did on this. I think I've felt that if it's, especially as the company becomes much larger, the CMO is like it's like somebody that's really good CMO. I think is just brings a different skill set that is different than the sales and the customer success side. Now
What
you
type?
could also make the argument
What
at
type
the
of skill sets? Just for
I mean,
like.
I think that brand, the brand to me is like not very important at all, actually, in the earliest stages. Oh yeah, I was gonna say, to be clear, in the earliest stages, as a as a strategy and creative agency, I
Yeah.
think brand is very important. But
Yes.
I think
I
it
agree.
becomes exponentially more important as the company becomes much larger, because it truly takes up a bigger position within the market. And I don't know that, like, I agree with you. Like demand gens, and it's like it's not like demand gen doesn't becomes less important, but you already kind of talked about it. Like you've got the machine now, right? So the demand gen is just like maintenance on the machine, test out new areas and continue to grow it. But as a company becomes much larger, that brand's huge, and I think a good CMO brings something very unique to that positioning, into that messaging, into that branding.
So I can see that. So that was my, the other arguments that I could see working, right? Like the argument I could see working is like when you get to a certain size, brand, like dimension is less critical. You always want to have a dimension and have a machine, but like most, like you probably, like especially if you're going to insurance, is like a limited size industry, and you probably already like talk to most of the industry that's relevant for you, most of the audience. Like brand is becoming a much bigger thing. And then yes, I agree with that yeah, there are CROs that could manage that too, but a dedicated CMO to continue enhancing the brand and build that, and like creating a brand is different than funnel management, let's call it, right? Like CRO funnel management, which type of leads we need, which type of clients, how do we talk to them, what do they see? This is like the life cycle and the journey of the client. But how they get to this journey, there's a lot of brand building, which earlier stages, I think the CRO is fully capable and should be doing that because it's very tied to the customer journey. But as you grow, yes, your point, I fully agree with that. Like brand becomes something different that eventually will build your dimension as well, right? Like when your brand is big enough, this is like people recognize you as the market leader or whatever that is, then the brand is what gets you there, not the lead gen, not the dimension. The thing that I would push back is, okay, how do you know this CMO is doing a great job? Like how do you measure those brand? How do you understand, okay, if you're a certain size company and you hire a CMO because they're awesome, how do you know they're actually doing a good job? When do you know, how do you evaluate them? Like if it's not the leads and the demand and the conversion to, like,
I think those are still. I think those are
okay,
all like. I think those are all on the table, 100%. Conversion in particular, like conversion in Amber, Amber Willett, who was on here, will be the previous episode from this. She had like one of the best examples I've heard of how in her campaign, she's talked about how they changed the positioning of a product. It's like virtually the same exact product, but then the sales went through the roof. So they had better positioning, segmentation, and that's where truly good. Like when I say brand, when I mean brand, I mean that's your brand messaging, your brand guidelines, how you're positioning, your how everything
product
comes together.
marketing, a lot of
Yeah,
that. Yes,
yeah,
yeah, I
exactly.
agree with that. And this should measure, like this should make sales easier, right? So I like, yes, the thing I've gotten in the past was like, oh, it's really hard to measure. How do you do all that? Like, I think it has to move metrics, like
Yeah.
if you're you're working with a creative agency and you build your brand, or you hire the CMO and you're building your brand, this has to have a direct impact. I don't know what's the timeline on that. It's a 30, 60, 90 days, or it's longer time frame than that, but you have to have a way to really measure it. Because if not, for me personally, it's too soft. It doesn't matter how big you are. I know that a lot of marketing people would probably say otherwise. Like sometimes you can't measure everything, but for me, it has to have an impact on the metrics.
Yeah, it's tricky because you're not going to get it in 30 days. Like I don't want to say that's impossible. It's not impossible.
Yeah. Makes sense. I agree.
And Amber actually like challenged my kind of thought process on that when hearing like what she was talking about. So you mentioned this a little bit earlier, right? So we talked about your career, we talked about your philosophy, how you kind of go about this with the experimentation and all of that. It's like you're coming up on 8 years at Agentero. Like by far the longest place
Yes.
that you've stayed. And like by today's standards, that's a lifetime. At one business. What
But
is it
especially
about?
startup, it's like dog years in startups. But yeah.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, you're like you've lived two lives. Um, what? Why? What is it about Agentero that keeps you excited? Keeps you like in this, as you kind of talked about, this state of growing and being challenged. What is it?
Mhm. So, I mean, why Agentero initially? I think it's the people. Luis, which I joined him as the second employee, is great. It's fun working with him, and then the team that we hired is amazing, and all the hard things that smarter people than me need to do, I've hired smarter than me people that could do those things. So I keep challenge, I keep my own challenges, but have really, really strong team to do a lot of the things that I could think about what we need to do and what are the metrics we need to move, but they will eventually do in a great way. So this is one way that keeps me going. Really, really strong team, really fun to work with. The other thing is we are always building new things, and as said, I'm a builder. So producer flow is the new thing that comes up. Like I saw a challenge. I have the room in this company to build new things, which is exciting. I love to build. I love to create new things. I love to build things from scratch, especially on the go-to marketing. I love to experiment more. Like, we have this machine, it's working, we experiment more, but it's working and it's predictable and we know what's going on. We always need to improve, but it's there. If it stayed this way, I would probably be bored and 8 years and try to look for my own thing. But then I found a new problem to solve. I managed to convince the team to solve it. The team saw it in similar eyes, and we built a new product. And now we are going to market with a totally new audience, totally new product, totally new set of challenges. So it's like building a new company. So yes, 8 years at Agentero, but both first within Agentero, it's probably like we pivoted like 3 or 4 times until we got to the market where we are. So it's like almost like building 3 or different 4 companies. This is just regular startup. That's why I say it's like dog years. So you build a lot of different things and you change and you pivot. So this is part of the fun for me, at least, right? Like this is part of what gets me going. And then I have a room to build new things, right? So we're building a new product, going to market. This is exciting. I don't need to go to another company to do it. For now, I have it here. When this one happened, maybe I'll find for something else, look for something else or do something differently. But it's really fun. Really fun building. I really enjoy that. So that's why I'm going on 8 years. Probably do a couple more at least.
Well, look, it makes sense. I mean, you joined early, and it's been a rocket ship. So I hear you on that. Like there has been, it's like they say a high growth startup every 6 months is a totally different company. Just most people can't keep that growth rate where you guys have, and you can continue to get that. So it does actually make complete sense. Last question I have for you, and I'm curious if this is different than the first time you answered it. But if you could have a conversation with your younger self, age up to you, what would that conversation be? What advice would you give them?
Wow, that's tough. I don't remember what I told you last time. What would I give my younger self? Probably I said the same. Well, now I think it's just gonna be okay. Like going through things. I mentioned like my first company, 18 months, not making any dollar. It was very tough mentally, but also like just doing. It'll be okay. Like going through so many things. You learn so much from everything that you're doing. So keep doing. It'll be okay. That's what I would. I think it worked as a mantra for my career, for my life so far. But back then, I especially with my first experiences and when those things happen, you always feel like it's the end of the world. So I feel like this is the advice I would give myself.
It's funny because it is like when you look back on how many of those things that happened at that time, and I'm not trying to downplay like how much that was painful, how painful that was, and how much that sucked. But you just think like, this is it. I'm done. Like I'll never come back from whatever this thing is, and yet you do every time.
Yes, exactly.
So I love that.
You just do it, right? You just do it. It'll be okay. Like just try. If you don't try, how would you know? And you learn so much with everything. So I think that's like, that helps you learn, that helps you grow, that teaches you so many things, that creates your personality and who you are. I'll be a totally different person today if I didn't experience those things. So I think, but at the moment you feel like, yeah, it's the end of the world. Like there will be like, there were so many moments where I was like, giving up. I didn't, right? Eventually. But yeah, I think that's definitely the piece of advice I would give.
I love it. Ido, perfect place to wrap it up. Thanks for coming on today. This was a blast.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks, Colin.
Absolutely. I hope you enjoyed Ido and I's conversation. I love his approach to paid media, and I think it's well worth the shot if you have not tested this before, or if you have, give it another go. You may be surprised. If you want to learn more about Ido, you can find him on LinkedIn in the show notes. Also, if you like this episode, you can find me on LinkedIn to let me know. And if you really want to support the show, give us a follow on YouTube or give us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I promise you it is very much appreciated. And thank you for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week.